All right, let's jump right into today's explainer. Today, we are systematically unpacking Dr. Robert A. Peterson's fascinating academic lecture, Humanity and Sin. We're going to dive deep into how different societies, philosophies, and historical frameworks view human nature.
Because when you think about it, it's kind of the ultimate philosophical question, right? What exactly is a human being? The way we choose to answer this fundamentally dictates everything. It dictates how we treat people, how we structure our societies, and even how we measure our own self-worth. Are we just biological machines? Are we a cosmic accident? Or is it something more? To unpack Dr. Peterson's pretty dense lecture, we're going to take a tour through a gallery of distinct perspectives. We'll start with a search for identity, move into machines and biological drives, check out economics and cosmic pawns, look at freedom and social networks, and then wrap up with the Christian view. Let's get into it.
Starting with Section 1, the search for identity, and specifically, how we define human value.
Dr. Peterson kicks off the lecture with this incredibly transactional concept, the human as a literal machine. In this framework, you are valued absolutely and solely for what you can output. Think about it. Employers essentially just rent your skills and your energy for a few hours a day. And if a robot can come along and do it better, faster, and without needing a sick day, well, you're replaced. Dr. Peterson makes this really sharp observation that this transactional view even creeps into institutions like churches. People just become giving units or useful cogs. You're valued strictly as a means to an end, not an end in yourself. Moving deeper into this, we hit Section 2, machines and biological drives. We're talking animals and the libido.
Here's where things get really reductive. Behaviorist psychology basically erases the line between humans and animals. Through this particular lens, you and I are just higher animals. Our actions are dictated entirely by biological drives and conditioning. You know Pavlov's dog, right? Salivating at the sound of a bell? Well, in this framework, human behavior is shaped the exact same way, just a series of positive and negative reinforcements. There's no unique qualitative difference between us and the rest of the animal kingdom. And that leads us to another major biological reduction, Sigmund Freud's view. Freud looked at humans primarily as sexual beings. He set up this massive contrast between the id, which he described as the seething, totally amoral cauldron of drives demanding instant gratification, and the superego, which is the internal censor built up by societal restraint. In this model, pretty much all human behavior is just the modification of this raw sexual energy. Now, Dr. Peterson points out that even if we reject Freud's strictest theories today, our culture has kind of swallowed his basic premise, hook, line, and sinker. To illustrate just how weird our society's obsession with sex has become, Peterson cites author C.S. Lewis. Lewis had this hilarious analogy. He said, imagine a theater packed with people. The lights dim, everyone is completely silent, all gathered just to watch a covered plate be slowly lifted to reveal a mutton chop. Lewis argued that if you actually saw that, you'd think, man, something has gone fundamentally wrong with that society's appetite for food. And he challenges us to consider if the exact same thing has happened with our sexual instincts. Let's shift gears to Section 3, economics and cosmic pawns. This is where materialism meets existential despair. According to the ideology of dialectical materialism, which originates with Karl Marx, we are fundamentally economic beings, period. This view says that we are driven completely by material needs like food, clothing, housing, and history itself. It's just seen as this inevitable, unstoppable march through strict economic stages. You go from slavery to feudalism to capitalism and ultimately ending in this utopian state ownership where all evil supposedly just withers away. But wait, what if we aren't driving history at all? What if we are literally just cosmic pawns? This brings us to existentialism. As defined in the lecture, this is an intensely pessimistic view. Humans are entirely at the mercy of blind, indifferent forces of chance. Whether it's a completely hostile universe, the random whims of political superpowers, or the threat of total nuclear destruction, the end result is the same, a profound, crushing sense of helplessness. The source highlights this existential pessimism perfectly with a quote from the philosopher Bertrand Russell. Get this, only on the firm foundation of unyielding despair can the soul's habitation henceforth be safely built. Wow. Russell essentially viewed humanity as nothing more than an accidental collocation of atoms, completely destined for extinction when our solar system eventually burns out. Talk about a bleak framework. Dr. Peterson illustrates this total absurdity using two classic literary examples. First, Jean-Paul Sartre's short story The Wall. In it, a captured revolutionary refuses to rat out his leader's location, fully accepting he's going to die. So he throws out a totally fake, random location just as a joke to his captors. But then, irony of ironies, he finds out his leader accidentally moved to that exact spot. His life is spared, not by some grand heroic act, but by a completely absurd twist of fate. Contrast that with Albert Camus' myth of Sisyphus, the guy doomed for eternity to push a massive boulder up a hill only to watch it roll back down every single time. It's maximum effort with literally zero permanent result.
So let's pivot away from that despair and look at Section 4, Freedom and Social Networks, the will versus the collective.
This is a total 180-degree turn. We're looking at the free being perspective. This approach argues that the human will is the absolute essence of your personality. Freedom from restraint is everything. And what's really fascinating here is that this view rejects all excuses. You can't say, well, it's just in my genes, or, hey, I was raised that way. Blaming your genetic or social conditioning is exactly what existentialists would call living an inauthentic existence. To be fully human here, you have to step up and accept total, absolute responsibility for your own self-determination.
This defiant philosophy is perfectly encapsulated in William Ernest Henley's famous poem Invictus. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. It's an incredibly powerful, deeply individualistic rejection of the idea that we are just biological machines or helpless cosmic pawns.
But on the flip side of that, you have the social being paradigm. This completely rips the focus off the individual ego. It posits that you are fundamentally defined by your interactions. In this view, human beings don't actually have a fixed, isolated nature inside a vacuum. You are quite literally the sum of the network of relationships and connections you have. Basically, if you are outside of a social group, you aren't truly fulfilling your human essence. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the Christian view, the image of God and eternal destiny. Let's break down the lecture's concluding framework. Dr. Peterson presents the biblical framework as a direct answer to the previous models. In this view, humans are not accidental clusters of atoms. We aren't just stimulus response machines, and we aren't merely highly evolved animals. Instead, we are the result of a conscious, intentional creation made in the image of God. Importantly, Dr. Peterson notes that this view asserts humans are specifically designed for a personal relationship with their Creator, and that we possess an eternal destiny that extends way beyond our temporary physical welfare. Now, this represents a massive shift in how human value is actually calculated. Think back to that machine model we started with, where people are just replaceable cogs valued only for what they produce. The Christian worldview flips that entirely, asserting that individuals have immense inherent worth. Dr. Peterson points to biblical teachings that say even the hairs on a person's head are numbered. He argues that human value isn't something you earn by economic output or sexual desirability. It is securely conferred upon you by a higher source.
The source wraps up with a really beautiful reflection on Psalm 8, which is an ancient creation poem. Peterson explains how the poem starts by zooming way out to the macro, the vast heavens, the moon, the stars, and then zooms right into the micro, marveling at humanity. It frames human beings as being crowned with glory and honor, set just slightly lower than heavenly beings, and given stewardship over the earth. It's a profound declaration of significance. And honestly, it stands in total, stark contrast to Bertrand Russell's unyielding despair.
Throughout the lecture, Dr. Peterson clearly argues that this biblical framework offers the most complete and satisfying understanding of the human condition. But honestly, no matter what your personal background is, walking through all these different frameworks forces a pretty intense mirror check. So we'll leave you with this. Which image of humanity ultimately shapes the way you view yourself? And maybe even more importantly, how does it shape the way you treat the people around you? Something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one. Keep learning.